Hi, this is Daniela, and welcome to Bestie Life, the podcast, where we help you stop burnout now. If you're tired of running on empty, juggling all the things, and wondering when your life is supposed to feel better, you're in the right place. This show is your go-to space for real talk and practical strategies to help you protect your energy, create balance, and actually enjoy the life you're working so hard for. You'll get a mix of solo episodes and honest conversations with guests. My goal is to help you feel less alone, more empowered, and way more in control of your time and energy and well-being. So let's get into it. Hey there, and welcome back to Bestie Life, the podcast, the show where we talk about real life burnout prevention, self-care strategies, and how to actually feel human again in the middle of your busy, beautiful, chaotic life. I'm your host, Daniela, and today we're going to dive into something that doesn't take any money, any fancy tools, or any extra time, but it can change everything. And we're talking about the power of perspective. So if you've been stuck, spiraling, or just straight up over it lately, this one's for you. So grab your favorite bevy, grab something to write with, and let's dive in. So the first thing I want to do is kind of just briefly touch on what is perspective, because I want us to all kind of be working from the same framework and same definition. So perspective is basically the lens through which you see the world. It's shaped by your experiences, your upbringing, your values, your mood, even your level of sleep. Seriously, ever notice how your whole outlook changes after a nap or a night of lack of sleep and everything just is so negative? But here's the kicker. Perspective isn't always truth. It's your version of the story. And just like you can zoom in or zoom out with a camera, you can shift your point of view. And that shift can be the difference between feeling stuck and starting to move forward again. So let me give you an example. Think about traffic. You're running late. Someone cuts you off and suddenly it's a whole storyline, right? People are so selfish. This always happens to me. My day is totally ruined. Now, what if that same traffic gave you time to call a friend, listen to a podcast like this one, or just breathe before walking into whatever's next? And you weren't late, the amount of time, still stayed the same, you made your event on time, but how would you look at that traffic differently? Because we're talking about the same situation, but a different perspective, right? And so sometimes being able to make that shift ahead of time without the hindsight of 2020, because I think that's a lot of times where we wait for perspective to shift is after the fact, after we can see that difference. But being able to shift it ahead of time gives us our power back. And so the thing is, perspective can have a huge hold on us because it shapes what we're focusing on. It shapes how we feel. And how we feel shapes what we do or don't do in a situation, right? I don't know if you've ever heard me say, when you think differently, you feel differently, and you feel differently, you act differently. So we're changing the way we think so that we can feel differently and then act or even not act completely different. Ever notice how two people can go through the same situation and come out totally different? Or, like if you've ever seen a car accident, they'll have all the eyewitnesses. They might have 5 eyewitnesses and 5 different perspectives of what happened, what caused the accident, and those types of things. And so recognizing that perspective shift can be the key. Imagine like one person gets laid off and sees it as the worst thing ever, where another person is able to see it as the wake-up call or chance they needed to pivot. Neither person is wrong. It can be the worst thing ever and it can be the wake-up call you needed. And so the one with the more empowering perspective, though, they're usually the one that's going to take some action. They're the one that's going to have more ownership in the solution, and they're going to have the power. That second perspective is where the power is. So even though both perspectives can be true, the one that gives you the power is the one that's going to help you kind of rise above, the one that's going to help you change in the direction you want to go. Because if you're feeling burnt out or overwhelmed, that negative perspective can be the thing that drowns you, that brings you down, that keeps you stuck. All right. So let's now look at how do we intentionally shape our perspective and knowing what influences it overall. So some of the things that can mess with our perspective are stress, like when you're maxed out, when you're totally overwhelmed, everything feels bigger and worse than it actually is. And this is, where that sleep comes in too. When I'm tired, again, that's a form of stress, being fatigued, you're going to feel like everything is bigger and worse than it actually is. Another thing that can influence and mess with your perspective is comparison. Social media looks like everyone else is thriving when you're just surviving. And I don't know if you've ever heard the quote, comparison is the thief of joy. That lens of looking through it of what everybody else has is going to mess with how you see the things in your own life. And then the last one is assumptions. A lot of times we fill in the blanks with the stories that aren't always true. What we assume somebody else is thinking or what we assume somebody else's motivation is. Like they didn't text me back, they must be mad at me. Sound familiar? You've ever thought that? Or we assume someone's judging us a certain way. And so the good news is we can question these automatic thoughts. We can train ourselves to zoom out and say, what might be true here? What else is true? And that's not toxic positivity. That's emotional maturity. And being able to kind of learn these tools to make that mental shift and practicing them is going to help make them happen quicker. So I always love a quick, actionable, practical strategy. So here's some quick perspective shifting tools that you can start to use right now. The first one is, what's another way to look at this? It's a magical question in some ways because it opens up options, and they don't always have to be realistic or the ones that you're actually going to use or follow through on or make happen, but just being able to see it from a different lens. What's another way to look at this? Maybe pretend you were talking to somebody else instead of yourself can open up some of those options as well. And that's part of the second one. Would you say it to a friend in that exact situation? Let's be real. We're always kinder and nicer with others than we are with ourselves. And yet we talk to ourselves more than anybody else that we talk to anybody else in the whole world. So what would you say to a friend? Again, can you then look at it from a different way? See some of those other options. The third one is to zoom out. Maybe ask yourself, will this still matter in a week, in a month, in a year? Not everything deserves a front row seat in your brain, and being able to zoom out and look at it from the bigger picture. Will this matter in 2 days, in 4 days, in a week even, is going to help you, again, have that different lens. The fourth one, look for what's working. A lot of times when we're in survival mode, your brain's on high alert for danger or drama, and we don't always actively notice then what's going well, even if they're tiny things, but having that what's working is going to help rebalance our perspective and lead us into this last area, which I love, which is practicing gratitude. But make it honest, okay? Not, oh, I should be grateful, but more like, even though today was rough, I'm glad, I got to talk to my kid for 5 minutes without distraction. I'm glad I got to do this, and recognizing those small moments of what went well and what worked, and really making it part of then that gratitude. Again, like I said, from an honest place is going to be the key when it starts to changing your perspective, changing the narrative of what you're telling yourself, and looking at these things from a different perspective. Because here's the bottom line. Perspective doesn't erase your problems. Life is still going to happen. Things are still going to go wrong occasionally. You're going to have your ups and downs. But when you can look at it from a different lens, you own the perspective a little bit differently. You're able to pivot not only the story you tell yourself, but how you choose to move forward with those things. That shift in perspective allows you to change the way situations play out, change the narrative of how you choose to allow them to affect you. And it helps you then just ultimately deal with them differently so that you have some breathing room. It gives you that choice. And when you're juggling a lot, having a choice in how you respond rather than react is everything. So next time you're spiraling, snapping, or just sitting in your car wondering what the heck has been going on, why are things playing out like this? Why is my life like this? Just pause and ask yourself, what's another way to look at this? you might be surprised at what you find. So if this episode hit home for you, or maybe you need to share it with a friend who needs that mindset refresh, as well as if you want more strategies like this, especially ones that don't involve overhauling your whole entire life, definitely subscribe to this podcast, as well as subscribe to my free newsletter where you get simple, actionable strategies, reframes, and techniques right in your inbox. So come hang out with me, and thanks so much for listening. And remember, keep going, keep breathing, and I'll talk to you soon. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you got something out of this episode that really made you feel seen, supported, or just a little bit more grounded. If you have any questions or thoughts, I'd love to hear from you. And if you're up for it, please leave me a 5-star review. That will help more people find the show and join this community. I'll leave you with 2 of my favorite quotes. Alone we may be strong, but together we're stronger. And when we support each other, incredible things happen. So let's keep showing up for ourselves and each other, and maybe even have some fun while we're at it. I'll talk to you soon.